Welcome in, Josh.
How's it going?
Good. How are you? I'm actually glad someone decided to turn their camera on. It's always good to talk to a face. Sorry, on TikTok you can't see his face, guys.
Well, I did want to point out. So I know you went through a lot of different things, but one of them you did talk about Ezekiel, talking about the temple. When he talks about when God is talking through Ezekiel about the temple, it's not about the temple that's supposed to come. That it's actually talking about what they're doing at the time of the temple that they have, and that God is telling them what they were doing was abominations. It's not a contradiction that later on uh, God's going to allow that, but he's saying at the time for the law that they gave them, they were allowing foreigners who were uncircumcised in heart and in flesh in his sanctuary, defiling it
Right. And
when they would offer the
when was
food.
Ezekiel written?
It was,
You know I'm going to test you.
I think it was during the time of Babylon.
Yeah, he was near the river when it first started getting written, and he was in the Babylonian exile, and he was prophesying what's going to happen after they return from Babylon, and it included the restoration of Israel and a restored temple. That's why we have Ezekiel chapter 37, the Valley of the Dry Bones, coming to life, and then we've got actual measurements, I believe, starting in chapter 41, 40 or 41. Let me grab it. I've got my Bible on me. Yeah, in the 25th year, chapter 40, in the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, on the 14th year after the city was struck down, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was upon me and brought me there. And he brought me in visions of God to the land of Israel. And he set me down on a very high mountain. And then he goes through and he gives measurements for the new temple. Like, this is how you're going to lay it out. Here's how big it's going to be. Here's where the doors are going to be. Here's where the various tribes of Israel are going to be situated in the land again. And here's what's going to happen. The Messiah, the Prince Nagid, he's going to come and he's going to lead all of the Israelites into repentance. And they're going to give offerings and sacrifices again, just like the law of Moses had it. And he tells them which animals they're going to sacrifice, when they're going to sacrifice them, and how the non-Jewish people are going to participate in it. So all of this was something that was supposed to happen after Ezekiel.
Yes, that's going to happen when Jesus comes back a second time, and he's in Jerusalem, and then the nations of the world will go to Jerusalem and
And then they'll need
do
to be
sacrifices
circumcised.
there.
So, but you understand, if you take Ezekiel and you kick the can down the road and say that this is talking about the second coming, then you've got a big problem, because then you've nullified all of Paul's theology. Paul says that the law was temporary and that you won't need it when Jesus comes back. And then that means there are no sacrifices, no circumcision. Nobody cares about that.
Well, the sacrifices for sins, yeah. Like, well, even after the disciples became apostles and Jesus rose, they, like Paul himself, also went to the temple and continued to do those. I guess you'd call them rituals, but it's not that he was doing them to be saved or to pretty much keep the law. It was a tradition. Like when he says that he's everything to all people. So for the Jewish people, like instead of like what do you call it, like he makes himself like them and participates with them, but also gives them the gospel, like, hey, Jesus actually fulfilled all this. But then when they go to the Gentiles, they tell them you don't have to do this because it's all fulfilled in Christ, and then
But
he
I
rebuked.
don't think that addresses my point, my man. My point is that if these offerings and sacrifices, as described in the book of Ezekiel, are referring to the second coming, then it nullifies the work of Jesus on the cross.
Well, it's not replacing what Jesus did. It's just they still could be symbolisms of what
so,
everything that Jesus did.
so they're going to slaughter all the animals just as a symbol of things to come.
Well, they still do offer, like, not all the sacrifices were sin offerings. Like some of them were offerings to God as gifts. So like there's the specific sin offering that was done every year for like the nation, and then I think there were
Yeah,
offerings
we know
that.
about the offerings, but that's still not my point. My point is, if the offerings are going to come back according to the law of Moses, including the sin offering in Leviticus chapter 5, then it nullifies what Jesus did. If Jesus came and he died to put an end to the animal sacrifices, as it says in Hebrews chapter 7, then we shouldn't see the animal sacrifices returning in Ezekiel.
Well, it doesn't say that the offerings that they're giving at that time are dealing with their sin.
Yeah, it
Like
does.
Jesus.
It literally says that, yes, there would be sin offerings in Ezekiel. Want me to bring them up?
Well, yeah, in the gateway were two tables on this side and two tables on that side, on which they slay the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering.
Yep.
At the outer side, as well goes up to the entrance, north gate. Yeah, well, I don't know. This is something that I have read also, and I found very interesting. Like talking about sacrifices again during that second coming. So, but I don't think
But there's
it's
no second coming in
replacing.
Ezekiel. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't say the Messiah is going to come and then he's going to die and he's going to come back later. It says that the prince is going to arrive. He's going to reunite the north and the south. He's going to rescue all the people, bring them back to the land, and then they'll go back to doing the law of Moses as they were before. Ezekiel 36 and 37 details it pretty clearly. Doesn't say he's going to die and come back.
Yeah, so I I don't think it's contradicting what Jesus already does though. Like if they were to go back, because they're Jewish, like the Jewish people are doing that. So
Right. Let me try this again. Also, Kim, thank you for the $2 super chat. Kim says the guest is showing on TikTok, but the guest box is blocking him. Yeah, I think I've got him moved over now. I think you should be able to see the guest. Okay, but you're still mixing my point. If the offerings and sacrifices, the sin offerings, etc., the circumcision, everything, if all of that is talking about the second coming of Jesus, then it nullifies the entire book of Hebrews and almost all of Paul's teaching. Paul says that the law is done, that there is no need for the sacrifices anymore. So you can't have them coming back.
well, yeah, there's no need for them because Christ fulfills it. But
Okay, so then you can't say that Ezekiel is talking about offerings and sacrifices at the second coming. Ezekiel just contradicts the New Testament theology. It's as clear as day. And so does Jeremiah. Jeremiah 33 clearly says that when the Messiah comes, the branch of David, that there will be burnt offerings, grain offerings, and sacrifices forever, for all time. So you can't tell me that these don't contradict New Testament theology. That's one of the reasons why I know that the New Testament cannot be a logical extension of the Old Testament.
Well, I guess it all depends because when Jesus does come the second time, he'll be reigning for 1,000 years, and sin and death aren't done away with. Like there's still going to be people who will live, and then after 1,000 years, Satan will be released. So there's still things that are going on. It's not until everyone's cast into the lake of fire, then there'll be the new Jerusalem that comes, and then God's going to wipe away every tear and everything like that. So like, because Jesus is going to come and he's going to also slay all those who choose to rebel against him. So there's still death and there's still things like that. And it's only those who go into the rapture and come back with Christ at the second coming who are going to reign with him. And then there's going to be people
that doesn't
who are
address
left on
anything
the
we're talking about. That doesn't address why there's going to be offerings and sacrifices again. If Jesus comes back and there are sin offerings and sacrifices again, then Jesus died for nothing.
No, Jesus still completed everything where like ultimately he fulfills everything. But just like I said,
fulfills what? Everything is meaningless to me. What did he fulfill?
He fulfills the whole law.
How?
The whole law. Well, everything is symbolic of what Christ came and did. So
what's symbolic? You keep saying blanket words that mean nothing. You can't say everything is symbolic. Be specific. What's symbolic?
So if you look at like the Passover feast, right?
What about
It's
it?
all symbolic of Christ.
No, it's
So
not.
just how God told the Israelites to take the lamb, to slay the lamb, and then put it on the doorpost. And when the death angel comes, he'll pass over the house. It's the same way how, because
Do we
Christ
still
being the
die?
perfect. Well, yeah, we still die right now.
Well, that's
No, but
meaningless then. Okay, so if we still
well,
die,
no,
then
well,
the
because
Passover lamb
the
imagery
Bible,
is meaningless. So it's also
well, the
true
Bible
that
talks
according
about the
to the book
second
of
death.
Exodus chapter 12, that Jesus, if he's the Passover lamb, needs to be dead too. The Passover lamb doesn't come back to life. It's a bad imagery. Do you think the Passover lamb came back to life every year?
No, but
Okay,
it
so
was all.
well, he's not the Passover lamb until he's been sacrificed and
Yeah,
dead.
yeah. So just how, because the Bible talks about a second death, like being
Mhm.
thrown into the lake of fire. So all those who have their faith in Christ because of the blood of Christ, just like how the blood of the Lamb, the death angel like passes over them.
Yeah.
Also, death passes over us because we live because of the blood
No,
of
we
the Lamb.
die. We still, all of us
Well,
die just like the lamb does. The only difference
well,
is you believe we have souls and the lamb doesn't. So again, but imagery is also meaningless to me. Imagery is not prophecy. Like I could go to the Old Testament, and I do this often. For example, when the Christians came over from Europe and we genocided the Native Americans and we called it manifest destiny, we can just say, well, this is the typological fulfillment of the conquest. And what would stop us from doing that?
well, I guess I don't know, but like I wouldn't say
Yeah.
those people who
If
did that.
if
It
you can
was a
just
good
say
thing.
that if you can just say that anything that is relatively similar to something in the Old Testament is now a typological prophecy, then oh buddy, I've got a whole list for you. I've got a whole list of prophecies that I fulfilled. Daniel Silva, thank you for the $2 Canadian super chat. Says according to him, Jesus was Italian and from Jersey. I think he might be. So, but this is my problem: is we have very clear prophecies about the Messiah, and every time I read one, you're going to tell me, "Oh, that's for later. That's for when he comes back." And then when I ask you, "Well, tell me what he actually did fulfill," you can't point to one prophecy he actually fulfilled. And I have been doing this for a very long time. I know every prophecy about Jesus from the New Testament, and none of them
Well,
are actual prophecies. And before you answer, Aaron, thank you for the $20 super chat. Aaron says, for any 5 Christian guests who disagree with Justin, I will send them a brand new NRSV UE Bible if they commit to reading it critically and not favorably. And I love that. If you don't know, Philodragon, known as Aaron, has an abundance of extra Bibles. He's loving to, he wants to give them out to Christians. So get a hold of Aaron Leitz on YouTube or Philodragon on TikTok if you want to get yourself a free Bible. Sorry for the advertisement. Go ahead.
oh, okay. Well, that wasn't a prophecy. That was just something that you can look at and see, like, because Paul and everyone else, they use the Old Testament to show Christ. So, like,
Okay.
I wouldn't say the how those that are symbolic, that's a prophecy. I'm because like they had the law and all that. So Jesus says, "I'm going to fulfill the law," and they show it by how he fulfills it, just like that same way. That's why he's called the perfect Lamb of God,
Okay. So
because
how
it's
do you
that
know it's
symbolic.
Jesus and not Simon Bar Kokhba?
Well, well, the Bible also explains like how that guy, when he had a group, and when he died, everyone dispersed, and it just eventually died off. And then the Jewish leaders say, if this is of God, then it will continue.
If it's not in the Bible.
And if it's not, yeah, it's in the Book of Acts.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You mean when they're talking about what to do with Jesus?
Well, when they talk about this whole movement, they say that if this is of God, then
Right.
who can stop it? But if it's
Right,
not, then it will
yes.
die off.
Not about Simon, though. Yeah, there was no conversation said about Simon. Okay, so, but that's meaningless.
I'll give
Because
I'll give
Simon Bar Kokhba and Jesus fulfilled the same number of prophecies, which is actually maybe not true. Maybe Simon fulfilled more than them. Simon was actually a prince. He was actually a leader over Israel. Jesus was not. Micah chapter 5, Zechariah chapter 9, Jeremiah chapter 33 demand that the Messiah is an actual king from the line of David.
Well, Jesus is is going to be the king. Like,
But he's not.
He's already. No, he is.
He's not.
He,
Show me in the Bible where he was ever a king.
he says his kingdom is not of this earth.
Well, I would say the same
kingdom is
thing
in
if I was
heaven.
not a king. If I was a bullshit king and I was never crowned king over my people, I'd say, oh, my kingdom's not of this world. That's a meaningless, unfalsifiable claim. It doesn't say that the Messiah is going to be king of an invisible universe in the sky. It says the Messiah is going to be a ruler in Israel. Defeat Israel's actual enemies.
Going to happen that's going to happen in the second coming.
Well, it's not. I have no reason to believe that. If he wasn't king when he first came, I have zero reason to believe he's going to be king when he comes back.
Well, that's why the Jewish people believed that there were going to be two messiahs, one that was going to suffer and one who was going to conquer. They did.
No.
It talks about, I don't know, it might talk about it in the Talmud. That was something that they talked about.
It's in Sanhedrin. If you go to chapters like 82 all the way to like 89, you've got a bunch of predictions on what they think the Messiah or the multiple Messiahs will and won't do. The two Messiah theory, Messiah ben Joseph and the Messiah ben David, are indeed two different Messiahs, but they're only one of multiple different theories as to what they thought the Messiah could, would, or might appear as. So that's a meaningless assertion to me. So the Talmud posits a number of messiahs. It doesn't support one Messiah dying and coming back thousands of years later. It just doesn't. Now, the problem is you can't demonstrate a single prophecy from the Bible that says the Messiah is going to come, he's going to die, and then he's going to come back. Every prophecy that's actually about the Messiah just says he's going to come and he's going to do shit. And Jesus came and he didn't do anything.
Well, there actually is a prophecy in Isaiah that talks about, I think it is 53.
It's not. That's about the nation of Israel.
No, it's about Christ. It's about how Christ is going to suffer for the sins of the world.
Show me in Isaiah 53 where it says the Messiah.
Because, well, in Isaiah 52, God talks about his chosen servant. So actually, let me go to 52, and then we don't have to read of all 53, but if you want, we can.
I don't think you've actually read Isaiah, have you? Have you only read parts of Isaiah, or have you read all of Isaiah?
I've read it. Okay. I haven't memorized all of it. But
are you aware that Isaiah tells you who the servant is on like 9 different occasions?
Yeah, that is God himself.
No, that it's the nation of Israel. Isaiah 41, 8 through 9. Do you have your Bible with you?
Well, let me read this.
Nope, you're not going to do it. 52. I'm not letting you skip over the context. We're going to read the context
but
before you...
But this is something that I already brought up first.
You're going to read the context first. You guys are the kings of context. You're the ones that always say, I'm taking out of context. I'm not letting you skip the context. Leading up to chapter 53, the servant is identified at least 8 times.
All right. Well, all right. So we'll get back to 50.
I'll just read it for you.
What is it? Isaiah what?
Go to Isaiah 41, 8 through 9.
41, 8 through 9.
Read it out loud for everyone.
But you, Israel, O my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend, you whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest regions, and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not cast you away. Fear not, I am with you. But be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. That's all you need to read.
So in that passage, who's the servant?
Jacob.
Great. Israel. Go to Isaiah 43:10 now. Go ahead and read Isaiah 43:10 for us.
All right, 43. You are my witness, says the Lord, my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me understand that I am he.
Right, that's good. Okay, so here there are witnesses, plural, that are called the servant, right?
Yes.
Or my servant. Okay, so we're talking about the nation of Israel. The servant is a plural. Go to Isaiah 44, 1 through 2 now. Yeah, that's right, Daniel Silva. Thank you for the super chat. He says, Jews who believe in 2 messiahs are called Christians. Yeah, you're right.
44 what?
44, 1 through 2.
Yet hear me now, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen.
Yeah. Who's the servant here?
Still talking about Jacob.
Right, yeah. And Isaiah 44, 21.
Remember these, O Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I have formed you, you are my servant.
Fantastic. So who's the servant here?
That is Jacob.
Right. You'll go to 45, 4 now.
For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect, I have called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. I am the Lord, and there is no other.
Right.
There is no God besides me.
All right. So who's the servant here?
That is also Jacob that he's referring to.
All right. Now let's do the last one. Well, there's more, but we don't have to do all of them. Isaiah 48, 20.
Go forth from Babylon, flee from the Chaldeans, with a voice of singing, declare, proclaim, utter in the ends of the earth, says the Lord, has redeemed his servant Jacob.
Right. Servant here again is the nation of Israel. So
I don't deny that. I do believe that Isaiah, like God does call Israel his servant, but when you read it, he also says that he has his own chosen servant who is going to come and deliver Israel. So like it talks about a completely different other servant.
Did Jesus deliver Israel?
He did. He delivered them from their sin.
He didn't. He didn't deliver Israel from anything. The prophets say that he's going to deliver them from their enemies. That even Luke chapter 1 quotes it. Luke chapter 1 says that Jesus was born to fulfill what was written through the mouth of the prophets of old, that he would deliver us from the hands of our enemies and all those who hate us. That's a physical deliverance, not a deliverance from sin. There's no prophecy in the Old Testament about being delivered from sin, not even close. So in Isaiah 50, chapter 40 all the way to 55, this is what we refer to as second Isaiah. This is written by a prophet who identifies the nation of Israel as the servant on many occasions. And there's an arc. The arc in second Isaiah is that God's delivering his people from Babylon. That's why chapter 40 literally starts out letting them know that their time has been spent. Their penalty has been paid. They're done. They don't have to be in Babylon any longer. In fact, not only were they there to pay for their sins, but they were given double for their sins. They paid for their sins and for the sins of the nation, according to 2nd Isaiah. So when I get to Isaiah 53, I have zero reason to believe that the servant is anybody but Israel. Why would I ignore the context of 2nd Isaiah and insert somebody other than Israel here?
Well, yeah, let me go to Isaiah 53. 52 does talk about the sin-bearing servant, and Israel doesn't bear anybody's sins. They actually bear.
So if you read all of Isaiah, you would have seen where the nation of Israel was chastised for the benefit of the nations, because the nations, through the chastisement of Israel, will come to see that Yahweh is the one true God.
All right, so let me say this. So let me show you this. This is Isaiah 53.
How about we'll just read it all together, and I'll teach you how to read it properly.
Well, yeah, let me read it, all right?
Well, we'll start in 52. So if you go down to 52:10, we've got the beginning of the prophecy that we're actually concerned about. It says, the Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. What does it mean that God has bared his holy arm? If you read Isaiah, you'd know what it means.
Well, like bearing his holy arm, it's like the
It's very simple. Isaiah mentions it like 15 times.
Well, Jesus is referred to as the right hand of God. So
that's not an answer to my question. What does Isaiah say about the arm or the hand of the Lord?
I don't know. I guess that his right arm has delivered them.
Delivered who?
Israel.
From what?
Well, yeah. So the Lord has made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God.
Right, but
So
elsewhere in Isaiah, what does he say he's doing when he bears his mighty arm? Have you read the rest of Isaiah? Because I'm feeling that you haven't.
I don't know. Well, he's going to make known the salvation to the whole world. So it says that to the
That's
ends of
not
the
what
earth
it
shall
says in
see.
Isaiah. You're making stuff up. I'll put it on the screen and I'll read it to you. Thank you so much, Daniel Silva, for the super chat. Daniel says, caller, Jews don't believe a man can be God, and neither do the Muslims, actually. And Daniel also says, Daniel 5:5, that his finger can appear and write. Yeah, God has a finger, according to Daniel, which is wild. Okay, this is Isaiah, and this is going to be 48:14. Assemble, all of you, and hear, who among them has declared these things? The one the Lord loves shall perform his purpose against Babylon, and his arm shall be against the Chaldeans. We know exactly what the arm of the Lord is doing in 2nd Isaiah. It's delivering the people of Israel from Babylon. Do you follow?
Yeah, when it's like God doesn't have a right arm either, but it's a reference to what God is going to do. So like when it says like God's arm is against somebody.
I'm not saying he has an arm. I'm just saying that according to the text, the meaning of God's arm being laid bare is to rescue the Israelites from captivity.
Yes, but it was ultimately from sin and death.
No, it doesn't say that in text anywhere.
Well, if you read, so if you go to the end of 52, it talks about a servant who's going to bear the sins, and he's going to do a sprinkling on all the nations.
We're going to read all of it, but you can't find me a single passage in Isaiah where the bearing of God's arm has anything to do with anything other than rescuing Israel.
Well, because the salvation is for the Jews, but it was also for the rest of the world. That's why
the salvation is from Babylon. That's why we just read in chapter 48, God says, flee from Chaldea. The whole arc of 2nd Isaiah is that it's time to leave Babylon. That's the context of the passage. Everything in 2nd Isaiah is about leaving Babylon. Everything. And you would know that if you read it. All right, we'll just keep reading. Let me put it back up on the screen for everyone. Actually, sorry, I'm reading it off my notes. It never was on the screen. I apologize. Okay, so chapter 52, verse 10 is very clear. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our gods. That's God bearing his arm against Babylon. And it says, depart, depart, go out from there, touch no unclean thing. Where are they departing from?
From Babylon.
Thank you, because this is about Babylon. Yeah, it says, go out from the midst of it and purify yourselves, you who carry the vessels of the Lord, for you shall not go out in haste, and you shall not go out in flight. For the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. And then it says, see, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up. He shall be very high, which is what is said elsewhere in Isaiah about the nation of Israel. If you read,
look at this. Look at 52.
I know you're really excited, but we're not there yet.
You just read.
I know you're really excited, but we're still in verse 13. You gotta wait. You gotta wait. You gotta wait. I'm just gonna mute you, so no one can hear you. Okay. Verse 13 says, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up. He shall be very high. Thank you for the hat. I appreciate that. Elsewhere in Isaiah, God says over and over again that I will exalt you. I will exalt you over the nations. It says in chapter 56 that the nations will see that I have vindicated you and they will run to you. Nations that do not know you will run to you. And he says in 59 that the kings of the nations will bring their wealth to you. This is what's being talking about in Isaiah. Isaiah is talking about the restoration of Israel.
Well, let's read the next verse that comes after that. So
I can't wait. So we'll read verse 14 because that comes after verse 13. Easy enough.
It says, Behold, my servant.
I don't know why you keep reading it. I'm going to read it in my version. It's just K. Thank you for the $10 super chat. It says, God is up on his throne saying, fuck hell, none of my followers actually read my book. I spent a long time on that damn thing. And Daniel says, dude, if you want to be free from sin and eternal life, be a good person and have a family. I agree. That's really all you need. Verse 14 and 15, let's read it. Just as there were many who were astonished at you, so marred was his appearance beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of mortals. So he shall startle many nations, and kings shall shut their mouths for them. Are you aware that other...
It says at 14.
Are you aware...
Just as many were astonished at you.
Are you aware that this is talked about in the rest of Isaiah?
Yeah, and it talks about the sin-bearing servant. But look,
it doesn't.
He talks about... All right, so Israel, he calls his servant, and then he's now talking about a different servant. He says, behold, my servant shall deal prudently. He shall be exalted.
He's not talking about a different servant. You just don't understand the context yet. So just
read it. It says it right there.
I promise we're going to read it. Listen, we're going to read all of it. We're going to read all. I'm going to mute you. We are going to read all of it. You don't have to keep skipping ahead. Every single word of this prophecy we're going to read. But what I'm not going to do is let you keep skipping ahead. We're going to do it one verse at a time, and you can cry all you want about it, but you're not skipping ahead on me. Okay. Now I'm going to unmute you.
I'm reading the same verse you just read. I'm just going back and showing you that it says it right there.
All right, so we're in verse 14. Why is this not about Israel?
Because it says, if you look at 13, he talks about his servant. So yes, obviously God does call Israel his servant. And now he's talking about a different servant. And he says,
how do you know?
Servant. Well, because he gives more context in 53 and on.
In verse 14 and 15, how do you know it's a different servant?
Because he says, just as many were astonished at you, because he's talking towards Israel.
And your translation says you, doesn't it?
I can go to, what translation are you using?
No, that's what it should say. I'm asking you, does yours say you? Because not all of them do.
Yes, and that says you.
Yeah, are you aware that you is plural? The Hebrew word there, atah, it's in the plural?
Well, I don't have the Hebrew on me right now, but yes, you in the Hebrew.
Actually, it's
also in English. It can also mean plural too. But
no, it's plural. It's plural in the actual Hebrew text. Elikha, which means upon you or according to you.
Well, that still sticks with it, because if he's saying just as many were astonished at you, so Israel is many. Yeah. He says just as many were astonished at you, so his, which is singular, visage was marred more than any man. So and his form more than the sons of men. But so it's still single.
Yeah, I know. So so it is in the other references of the servant. It says, you, O Jacob, and Israel are my servant. You're my witnesses, plural, and my servant. The servant is a collective noun for the nation of Israel, and it includes plural. It includes the nation of Israel. So you can't tell me that it's talking about a singular servant here just because it says servant in the singular, because it does elsewhere. In the previous passages where it says that Israel is a servant, it says servant in the singular, even though Israel and Jacob and the people are in the plural.
So, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. So
it does make it does make sense because it's a collective noun.
No, because if you read it, he's saying, "Behold, my servant." But if he's talking about Israel, how can he be talking about Israel and then telling Israel again that they were astonished at Israel, just like how they were astonished at Israel?
Who's astonished?
The nation of Israel is astonished.
No, the nation of Israel is not astonished. It doesn't say the nation of Israel. It says just as they were astonished. Who are they? You.
But like he's talking to the nation of Israel.
Yes, the nations are astonished at Israel. Why are the nations astonished at Israel?
Because of my servant.
Because of the rescue. It says just as there were many who were astonished at you. And why were they astonished? Where'd he go? Did he just cut out? I think he accidentally cut out. I don't think he meant to do that. He moved and he cut out. I think he's back. Let's see if we can get him in. Welcome back.
Oh, I didn't know I left. But
I don't know what happened. You moved and your phone cut out.
So
okay, so the fact of the matter is, everything in this is about the nation of Israel. You can't tell me that it's not. The whole context is about the nation of Israel. Isaiah 62, verse 2 and 4, the nations shall see your vindication and all the kings your glory. It's a glorification of Israel. Micah 7:16, the nations shall see and be ashamed of their might. They shall put their hands over their mouths and they'll be deaf when they witness what happens with Israel.
Yeah, right. So if you look at, because of like we all have chapters and verses, but it used to never be like that. It used to just flow. So if you look at the end of 52, it goes and continues into 53.
I know. Yeah, it's one unit.
And it says, Isaiah says, who has believed that report?
I don't know why you skipped over verse 15. Why do you keep skipping? Why do you not have Holy Spirit patience to read the whole text? All right, we're going to read the whole text. Isaiah 52:15 says, he will startle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. For that which had not been told to them, they shall see. And that which they had not heard, they shall contemplate. This is the nations. Yeah. He's saying the nations who haven't seen, and they haven't heard what God is doing, they're going to witness it, and they're going to contemplate it, right?
Yes, which is true, yes.
And then, guess what? The very next verse is the nations witnessing and contemplating it. It says, who has believed what we have heard? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Well, we already know the arm of the Lord has been revealed to the nations. It says, for he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look upon him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. The root out of dry ground is the nation of Israel. The prophet Isaiah tells you that in verse 60:21. Your people shall all be righteous. They shall possess the land forever. They are the shoot that I planted, the work of my hands. So again, everything in here is about the nation of Israel. There's not a single part of Isaiah 52, 53, 54, 55 that isn't about the nation of Israel. And let me tell you something else. If you think this is about a dying Messiah, you've got a big problem, because it contradicts every prophecy about the Messiah, every single one. But if you interpret it as the nation of Israel, funny, it matches every single prophecy about the nation of Israel. It agrees with everything in the Old Testament.
Well, no, there's many different verses that talk about different prophecies that talk about a dying Messiah.
Not one.
Was it Psalm 22?
Psalm 21 is not Psalm 22 is not even a prophecy.
Well, the Jewish people considered it Messianic.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they did not.
I'm being dead serious. They did.
I know you think you're being serious, but you're lying, because the Jewish people.
I'm not lying.
Do you know what a pesher is?
I do not.
There's a subsect of Judaism that practice pesher, and this is where you take the prophecies and the words of the Old Testament, the law and everything, and you just say, actually, there's hidden meanings in here, and then you reinterpret it using those hidden meanings. And during the time that pesher was happening, they turned a lot of things in the prophecies that weren't actually prophecies, and 9 out of 10 of them were nowhere close to anything happening. All those predictions fail. And the New Testament authors are doing the same thing with the Old Testament. They're using Old Testament passages out of context and just calling it a prophecy. But Psalm 22 is not a prophecy. Psalm 22 is a lament of David. And even if there was a subset of Judaism that thought they can turn anything into a prophecy, I would disagree with them too. A prophecy is quite clear. It's a word delivered by God through a prophet that is actually telling you what to expect or what to look for, or a prediction for the future. That's Deuteronomy 18.
But let's take Psalm 22 for example. Nothing that David writes about has anything to do with his own life.
No, that's why everything in Psalm 22 is about David's life. I'll put it on the screen so that you can't lie to the audience.
I'm not lying.
You are. You're repeating really bad talking points that we've heard 5,000 times, and I've debunked 4 million times probably. And you're going to be a 4,000,001. So it says, to the leader, according to the deer of the dawn, a psalm of David. My God, why have you forsaken me? Who's my God, my God? Who's speaking here?
David.
David. Okay. So David is speaking. That's the outset of the psalm, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. It says, why are you so far from helping me? The words of my groaning. Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night but find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. Okay, this is still about David talking, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the part that you want to read is about in in verse 16 and 17. But we'll start in 12. David's still talking about his struggles. He says, many bulls encircle me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. Is this a prophecy or is this David lamenting?
Well, nothing like that even happens in David's life. But
yes, it did. Have you bothered to read 1st and 2nd Samuel?
But if you read...
Yes, it did. Have you bothered to read 1st and 2nd Samuel?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what happened to David when he was on the run?
Yeah, Saul was chased though, but they didn't pierce his hands and
not
his
just
feet.
Saul. He was also on the run from his own son when he usurped the kingdom. He was also on the run from Saul, and then he was on the run at certain points when he was warring for the Philistines, when he was holed up in Ziklag. He spent like half of his life basically in military battles, and guess what? He didn't win every single one of them. So it says, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. This is clearly the prophet, I'm not the prophet, the king, speaking about his present struggles using metaphors. Just like he is in the prior verse. Many bulls encircle me. Literal bulls aren't encircling King David. He's referring to his enemies.
This is a different topic to get into, but when David talks about how they pierce his hands and his feet...
It doesn't say pierce.
It does.
It doesn't. Do you know Hebrew?
Yeah, even if you look at the Hebrew, yeah, there's a debate depending on whether if it says like a lion or whatever.
Yeah,
but like,
and why is that debate being had? Because it says, for dogs are all around me, a company of evildoers encircle me. They bound my hands and my feet. That's what the NRSV says. Yours says pierced. What word is actually in the Hebrew text? Do you know what it is?
I don't know. I forget what the word, but the reason why there's a debate is because it's
what's the Hebrew word for pierce?
I forget. I don't know.
It's dekar, and you'll find it elsewhere in the Old Testament to mean pierce. In fact, it's used in Zechariah chapter 12. You know what word doesn't appear in Psalm 22? The word for pierced. The word that we have there is ka'ari in the Masoretic text. Do you know what that means?
Well, this is the New King James, so they translate it to pierce, but the word that you're talking about, that's original of why there's a debate between a lion and I forget something else. Like, it's because there's a letter difference. There's one letter difference, so people there is, yeah, it's one letter difference of why they debated that. But even if
wrong, I'll just put it on the screen so everyone can see that you're lying. Hold on.
Even if you translate it as I was bit like a lion on my hands and my feet. That like
it doesn't say bite.
Well, when it's translated, because it's translated obviously whatever it is, like lion or the other one, like. All
right, so just stop talking. You're embarrassing yourself. Let me just tell you what's actually happening here. So the word that we have in the Masoretic text is ka'ari. Do you know what ka'ari means?
No, I don't know Hebrew.
It means like a lion. Okay. Now, do you know what it says in the Greek text?
There's two. There's one that's like a lion, and the other one that's like it eventually gets translated into pierced.
I've got it on the screen for everyone to learn. So in the actual Masoretic text, it says ka'ari, which means like a lion, which is why most of the Bibles that are translated honestly will just say like a lion. In the Aramaic Targums, it's ka'ari again, like a lion. When you look at the writings in the Talmud, we get something a little bit different. We get ka'aru, which means they defaced. Ka'ar means to deface, and then the u is the third masculine plural ending. And then if you go to the Greek text, you've got something different. It's arose. Oh, I can't even say that. Aruzav, which means they dug. Now that's really interesting that the Greek Septuagint says they dug, because as it turns out, the word that we're probably looking for, aru, means to dig, or is it kara? Now I have to look it up. Also,
and that's how they get pierced. Like, obviously, the New King James isn't the best translation, but like they obviously eventually translate it to pierce.
Kara means to dig, and that's not actually in the text. So the reason why people are saying, well, maybe it says kara, is because of the Greek Septuagint using dig, because kara can mean dig. But we don't have an actual Hebrew text that has that. The Hebrew texts that we have say like a lion. Now, it could also be ka'ar, which means to be ugly or to be defaced. We actually have those texts. We have Hebrew texts of Psalm 22 that say ka'ar. So we have no evidence at all that the word dakar, to pierce, shows up in the text. The closest you'll ever get is kara, which doesn't mean to pierce. It means to dig. And that's exactly what we would find if he was being attacked by a pack of animals, which is what it says. It says he's being attacked metaphorically by a pack of dogs. And before you respond, let me read these super chats before they disappear. Caller just hit the gym, save some money, travel the world, start a business, give to the homeless, and forgive yourself. Make yourself proud. And Daniel says the Bible is arresting your development, your drug. I agree. The Bible is absolutely doing that. So Psalm 22, first of all, is not even a psalm. Not even a prophecy. Second of all, it doesn't say anything about piercing. This is just David talking about his struggles. That's it.
Yeah, but nowhere in David's life have they ever divided their garments, and animals also
How would you know that?
Lots for their clothes.
How would you know that?
Lots for their clothes.
How would you know that?
That's a simple thing to. That's like
no. How do you know that David's enemies never divided his clothing?
Well, it would have been written.
What you think every event in David's life was written? And as it turned out, it was written. It was written in Psalm 22. So now you're just calling David a liar.
No, I'm not calling him a liar, because that's why there was such a debate on Psalm 22. That's why they said
it was written in Psalm 22. David says in Psalm 22 that his clothing was divided. Are you aware that that's what happened to people when they were conquered in battle? That their clothes were taken from them?
Well, that never happened to David because he escaped, because God had his hand on him. So that didn't happen to David. And he was never bound. And they never cast their loss.
You're wrong again. You're wrong again. David says that it happened to him. So either one of two things is true. Either it happened to David, and you're just telling David that he's a liar, or it's just a poetry about his warfare struggles.
Or it's also a prophecy about what happened.
Or it's not a prophecy. A prophecy is an actual prophecy. So what you're going to say is every single word of this psalm is about King David. But magically, when we get to verse 16, we're just going to call it a prophecy. But you wouldn't do that with anything else. If I took you to Deuteronomy chapter 20 and I read it to you, could you tell me if it's a prophecy?
Well, not to get too far off, but I would say this is a prophecy about Christ.
It's not a prophecy.
Like if you read the Gospel,
it's in the past tense. I don't care what the Gospel says. Everything in verse 16 and 17 is in the past tense and the present tense. Yeah, a prophecy is about what's going to happen in the future.
Exactly. So if you read the Gospels and you read the account
again,
Christ,
I don't care what the Gospel says.
They did tear his garments.
I don't care. We all know that.
They did mangle his...
No one cares. No one can hear you. I already muted you. Everybody knows what the New Testament says. Nobody cares. We're talking about what is a proper hermeneutic to know that something is a prophecy. And something's not a prophecy just because you want it to be a prophecy. Do you understand? A prophecy is an actual genre.
But you're going against so many ancient Jewish people.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you did.
No,
yes,
I'm not. No, I'm not.
The information. Yes.
No, I'm not.
That's why Psalm 22
You're
is so
coping.
singled out.
Psalm 22 is not a messianic psalm according to the Jews.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. You can cry all you want. You're lying.
You're a liar.
I've read the text. I've read the messianic text. I've read the text. The book.
I've read the messianic text. Too,
yes, I know the book that you're quoting from, and you're a liar because I've read the rest. I've read the rest of the Jewish text that you haven't read. And the rest of the Jewish texts disagree with you. What you've done is you've read apologetic books and you haven't read all of the Jewish writings. If you've read all of the Jewish writings, you would find out that anyone who practiced Pesher believed that anything could be a prophecy, but the actual Jews in charge, the actual Pharisees, the actual Sadducees, the actual people that were the leaders of Israel didn't practice that. You're appealing to a bullshit. You're appealing to a bullshit hermeneutic to say that a prophecy is what a prophecy is not. A prophecy is not anything you want it to be.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But like, even there's so many. Like Jesus even takes like when it talks about the serpent being raised in the wilderness, and then it will be saved. Yeah, that's
the Book of Numbers.
I'll be doing the same thing.
But that's not a prophecy either.
Okay, right.
See, this is the problem you have. You can't just say that Jesus said things that showed up in the Old Testament and they remind you of Jesus, and therefore it's a prophecy. That's bullshit. I've got a whole list of things about me. Do you want to see all the prophecies I've fulfilled? I'll show you. I'll show you all the prophecies that I'm going to show you all the prophecies that I've fulfilled based on the same hermeneutic that you've applied.
There's actual prophecies that God obviously gives that specifically.
I'm just going to mute you. Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Are you aware that my son is Egyptian? Let me unmute you. Are you aware that my son is Egyptian?
I don't care about if your son's being an Egyptian or not.
Okay, so my son's Egyptian, and that means I fulfilled Hosea 11:1 because I called my son out of Egypt. You see how garbage that interpretive model is? Your whole interpretive model for Jesus is that you can take anything in the Old Testament and just call it a prophecy if it vaguely reminds you of Jesus. But when I do the same thing, you're not going to let me do it. I guarantee you. Isaiah 65:9, I will bring forth descendants. Did I fulfill that prophecy?
I did too. Like if you take it that way, but that's so clumsy.
Ecclesiastes 9:4 says, I have joined myself to a dog rather than the dead lion. I fulfilled that. Am I the Messiah now? You see how easy it is to find things that you could pair up to somebody if you're just taking random texts from the Old Testament that aren't even prophecies. Exodus 4:12. Now go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak. That's what I do every day. I'm up here teaching people what to speak. Is that a prophecy about me?
I never said it was. I never said those things, like things that are symbolic in the Old Testament. I never said those were prophecies.
So Psalm 22 is not a prophecy then.
Well, it is a prophecy because Jesus.
No, it's not a prophecy. See, your starting point is it's a prophecy because Jesus said it's a prophecy, although he didn't actually say that. But
he does it while he's on the cross.
He quotes it. He doesn't say it's a prophecy. He just quotes from it.
No, he doesn't say that it's a prophecy.
Okay, so Jesus doesn't say it's a prophecy.
These things are being fulfilled.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that. You're lying again. He didn't say that.
Oh my God! So Jesus doesn't say that. My God, why?
Yes, he quotes the first line of the psalm. What he doesn't say is that it's a prophecy, and he doesn't say that he's fulfilling it. So here's the problem. Your justification that Jesus is the Messiah is that he fulfilled prophecies. And when we look at the prophecies, he didn't fulfill them. And you're going to tell me, well, these things that aren't actually prophecies, they're prophecies because Jesus said so. But that's bullshit. I use the same thing about me. I can say that Job 27:11 is a prophecy about me. And I know it's a prophecy about me because I told you it's a prophecy about me. I will teach you concerning the hand of God. I'm doing that right now. It's a prophecy about me. You know it's a prophecy about me because I told you it's a prophecy about me. But that's circular reasoning. You can't use the justification of fulfilled prophecies by pointing to non-prophecies and then saying that they are prophecies actually because Jesus said so.
Jesus didn't say it was a prophecy.
I agree. He didn't.
Jesus quotes Psalm 22.
Yeah. Do you think there's a reason why he did it?
Cross. Because he was fulfilling what was written.
No, there's nothing to be fulfilled there. No, Jesus quoted it because David went through similar struggles. Have you read all of the Psalms of David's lament?
Yes.
Okay, are you aware that some of them were quite famous in the first century?
But it doesn't...
Are you aware that some of them were quite famous in the first century? It's a yes or no question. Dude, I know you're getting frustrated that I don't buy your bullshit.
No, you're not letting me talk, dude. You just interrupted me.
That's because I ask you easy questions, and then do you want to not answer them? Do you know that some of David's Psalms were quite popular by the first century?
Okay.
And do you know which ones? Do you know which ones were the most popular?
No, I don't.
His laments. Do you know why his laments were the most popular?
Because they're very relatable. And talk about his struggle.
Because they're fucking relatable. Because the nation of Israel had been struggling for centuries. And so when Jesus is on the cross and he's dying and he's breathing his last breaths, he's thinking of the laments of David. And he cries out one of the most famous laments of David because he's struggling the same way David struggled. That doesn't make it a prophecy. And guess what? Hold on. Just stop talking. Even if Jesus said it was a prophecy, it's still bullshit. Because it's not a prophecy just because somebody says it's a prophecy. A prophecy is a clear genre of text. And Aaron, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says the New Testament is irrelevant, just as the Book of Mormon is irrelevant. I agree.
The New Testament's not irrelevant. Those were literally eyewitness accounts.
It's a book of lies. There's no eyewitnesses there.
This is how they preached the gospel. They didn't have the New Testament at the time. That's why they went to the Old Testament. Doesn't
matter. There's no eyewitnesses in the New Testament. Also, Daniel, thank you for the $5 super chat. Daniel says, "Caller, just tell them I'm rubber and you're glue." That's a great one. I like that.
So, like when
okay,
Paul
so
talks about how
give me the eyewitnesses. Give me the eyewitnesses. What are their names?
Matthew was an eyewitness.
Matthew didn't write Matthew. His name's not in there.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a whole different debate.
Who wrote Matthew?
I assume it's Matthew.
Well, his name's not in it. Show me where Matthew says I Matthew wrote this. Also, okay, JL, thank you for the $6.66. JL, I appreciate the donation. He says guests should quit while he's way behind. I agree. He's digging this hole real deep. They got a glutton for punishment here tonight. So Matthew,
John is also an eyewitness.
Okay, show me in the Gospel of John where it said John wrote it, because I can show you in the Gospel of John where there's authors other than John. Have you read all of John? Did you read chapter 1? Did you read chapter 21?
Yes.
So again, you've read apologetic books, but you haven't actually read the text itself. John 21 clearly says that there are multiple authors, and the multiple authors are recording the Gospel of John, and it includes the testimony of John. So the authors, plural, of the book of John were writing a narrative, and that narrative happened to include testimony from John. It actually happened to include testimony from John the Baptist at one point.
Yeah, so it's said that the Gospel of John and also the Book of Revelation were written around the same time because of the language and how John talks about Christ. So
not the scholars I know of. The scholars I know of don't believe that the Gospel of John were written by the Revelator. That's why we have the title John. That's why we have the title John the Revelator. Because John the Revelator, also known as John the Elder, is different from John the gospel author. But we don't even have evidence that John wrote John. And I just told you in John 21, the authors are not John. I'll just read it for you since, again, I know you haven't. All right, John chapter 21, verse 24. This is the disciple who is testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. And this happens more than once in the Gospel of John. There's multiple occasions where who's ever writing the Gospel of John says that they are taking somebody else's testimony. So if John's testimony is included in the Gospel of John, that's great. But he's not the one who wrote it. So the language of John is meaningless because John didn't write it.
It doesn't even say that he doesn't write it. It says that him, and then there's others who testify of that, who are the disciples. So that doesn't disqualify John from writing it.
No, wrong. I read. Since you weren't listening, I'll read it again. This is the disciple who testified to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. We is a plural. The person who is the we is clearly the person who is writing the sentence. That's a first person common plural. It's a we. Whoever wrote John, it's a we. And they're including testimony that they received from John.
It says this is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things, and we know.
Yeah.
And we know that his testimony is true.
And who's we?
The disciples.
No. The disciples didn't write this. The we is the authors.
Yes, John did. It says
no, the we is the author. Have you ever written a text? Do you know who we is? When you write a text, do you know who we is?
It literally says this.
When you write a text, do you know who we is?
Yes, and it
who's
says
we?
This is the disciple.
Who's
this
we?
Is the disciple who testifies
we?
Of these things and wrote.
I'm going to mute you till you answer my question. You can talk all you want. You're going to answer my question whether you like it or not. You can cry all night, but you're going to answer my questions.
Then why don't you just let me talk?
In a written text, who is we?
A group of people who are testifying.
No. We is a first-person reference. What is a first-person reference?
A first-person reference. It's directed towards the main person's perspective.
No, it's directed towards the person speaking. And in this case, we is plural. There are multiple people speaking.
Dude, it literally says right before that, this is the disciple, singular, who testifies of these things and wrote these things.
Yes.
And we, as a group, and we, the disciples.
It doesn't say the disciples. It says we know that his testimony is true.
Who do you think that we is, dude?
We is the people writing the gospel. I don't know why this is so hard for you. John is in the third person. The way that you talk about this is that if somebody is giving you a testimony that you want to include, you would say, his testimony is true, and we verify it. That's how authorship works. The we is always referring to the person speaking or the person writing.
Yeah, he literally says that he testifies of these things and wrote these things.
I know, and then what did they do with them?
Well, about what they saw, they wrote it down.
Yes, exactly. Yes, they wrote them down. The multiple authors working on the Gospel of John took John's testimony. Yeah, we'll just try this again from the beginning. I don't know why, like, logic and basic English is so hard for some people. It says, we know that his testimony is true. Is this a quotation from somebody in the narrative?
I guess so. There's no quotation.
Why is there no quotation in my Bible?
I don't know. There's no quotation in my Bible
because it's not a quotation. It's an editorial note from the editors of the book. We know that his testimony is true. The editors compiling the book are saying we know that John's testimony is true. The authors are not John.
It literally says
Yes,
at the beginning.
We've read it 5 times.
Let me finish. It says at the beginning, this is the disciple, single. He's talking about a single person. This is the disciple.
But who's saying it?
John.
No, John's not saying it.
Dude, he's literally using
not.
a single. He is.
No, you don't refer to yourself as this disciple, and you don't refer to yourself as his testimony. You refer to somebody else's testimony as his testimony. When it says we know that his testimony is true, that's somebody talking about John's testimony. It's not hard. It's basic English. Like, if you need to go back and take 5th grade English, just let me know.
No, because I'm reading it, and it's, if you like what you're trying to say about the different we's,
is that words have meanings?
Islands,
yes.
Yeah, like, well, if you look at the Gospel of Luke, it is a recording of multiple different eyewitnesses.
We're not reading the Gospel of Luke. We're reading the Gospel of John. I know that, and in the Gospel of John, the authors are recording the testimony of John.
Yes.
There we go. Yes, fantastic. I don't know why it took so long to get there.
John is recording.
John's not recording. John's giving his testimony to other people who are compiling them.
Like, what is the point that you're trying to get right now?
My point is very clear. We have no idea who wrote the Gospel of John. Whoever wrote it is compiling sources, and one of their sources appears to be the apostle.
It literally says, "This is the disciple." That's singular.
Yeah, keep reading.
Testifies of these things.
Yes.
So it's a singular disciple.
Read it. Read after the comma. Read it.
Oh my God, dude.
And it says yes, and
we, yes, that's a conjunction. Yep, I'm glad you know what a conjunction is.
We know that his testimony.
Yes, and who's we? And he's gone again. Where'd he go? He dropped out. He'll come back. I think he'll come back. I don't know. It sounded like his wife or his coach is in the background trying to help him out with his English. I couldn't tell. I've never seen somebody who just can't grasp how the English language work. It's not hard. The collective editors of the Gospel of John is saying that they've received his testimony and they're vouching for it. We know that his testimony is true. It's very easy.